Hello world, it's Birdo Prey 5, Qapla, and welcome to my review of Star Trek Picard, Season 2, Episode 9, Hide and Seek. Now, at the ending of last episode, Jurati, who is also now the Borg Queen, was with Dr. Soong and ordered him to get soldiers. So Dr. Soong called up some random general, and within a few minutes, 2 squadrons of the best, we're told, of special ops were dropped off at Dr. Soong's apartment. And Jurati, as the Borg Queen, was looking them over and even assimilated them by sticking in the Borg nanotubes to, make them Borgified. However, the people who came in to Dr. Soong's apartment were clearly both men and women. And I have a frame here where you can see about as many men as women in one shot. However, the people who come to France, they get beamed over to La Sirena, and there's going to be a big battle this episode. They are almost exclusively all men. I see one shot where I saw one woman, perhaps. But everybody else who comes and everybody who's ultimately killed is a man. A little weird that on camera it's half men, half women, but on camera all the deaths throughout this entire episode are men. So at the beginning of this episode, Rios is on the La Sirena with his doctor girlfriend and her son, and he realizes that Dr. Jurati or the Borg Queen in Jurati, has activated the transporter, and he looks ahead and he sees a whole bunch of people have been beamed into place. So he's saying, we got to run, we got to get out of here. And they come across a couple of these security guards or not guards, security personnel. And they run away. Then we have Jurati beam in. Then a second later, Jurati is clothless. And I thought we were going to get our first Borg boobs, but we don't. We don't get Borg boobs. It was, I don't know, I was afraid. Instead, we get a Jurati just from behind. She pulls out the Borg Queen's upper torso, uses her nanoprobes to assimilate the Borg Queen's clothing, and from then on, Jurati has the Borg Queen's clothing for the rest of this episode, and the Borg Queen goes back in her drawer, and we never see her again. Now, a few seconds later, Picard, what was it? Lazarus? Not the Romulan woman, not Laris. And Raffi 7, not Laris. Rios and his doctor friend and her son all come up. And Picard's like, are we too late? Yes, we're too late. They're all here. And you look back at the forest, and all of these green lasers are pointing at you. So this A-team, if you will, right? The A-team, they were in the Los Angeles Underground. So maybe they got lucky. Maybe the A-team is still in the Los Angeles Underground in 2024. And that's why it was so easy to get them to Dr. Soong's Los Angeles area home so quickly. But anyway, the A-team decided to pick visible lasers for a night mission. The problem with visible lasers, especially at night, is it of course gives away you as a target. So maybe not the best military choice from people who are supposed to be tactically minded, but whatever. I guess they also didn't know they were going to be Borgified, and that went over no problem with them. Okay, so here's the issues. This is a long and boring episode. The The dialogue is perhaps the worst of the season. What they do say is cringe AF, and this is an episode that could have been cut down to half its length or smaller and kept been as interesting to watch. There's just a lot of annoying dialogue, so I'm not going to go like I normally would in a review. We're just going to go over the biggest issues. And the biggest issue for me for this episode, and there's quite a few, at least three. One of them is what we just spoke about. The how the men and women ratio changes through a single transport. But a much bigger problem in this episode is that a little later, Raffi tells Seven, "Hey Seven, you would have made a great captain, as in a Starfleet captain. You should have joined Starfleet." And Seven says, "I tried to join Starfleet. They wouldn't take me after Voyager." So Seven now confirms that Starfleet, even Starfleet with Admiral Janeway, was unable to get Seven into Starfleet. Right? Janeway became an admiral almost immediately after getting back to the Alpha Quadrant, as we know from Star Trek Nemesis, I believe, or First Contact. Whichever movie came out right after Voyager got back. I'm guessing it's Nemesis. We saw an Admiral Janeway. And we're like, yeah, well, okay, so you think Admiral Janeway gets anything she wants? How does she not get Seven into Starfleet? Seven even says Janeway threatened to resign, and they still couldn't get her in. And I'm like, she should have gone through with it. Picard at least really did resign for the Romulans, so Janeway didn't? That's a pretty shitty thing. But I guess maybe you could say, oh, well, Seven begged her not to resign, and so then Janeway didn't, but it's just kind of weird. And what about everybody else? What about Tom Paris? What about Chakotay? Well, Chakotay was probably, if Starfleet didn't like 7 of 9, then what did they do what did they do about the Marquis? Did they all go to jail? I mean, this is really, this is a scary what if scenario as to what would have happened to the Marquis crewmen if 7 of 9 wasn't allowed. Did they arrest Chakotay when he got home? Did they rearrest Tom Paris? I don't know, but I need to know these things now. They scare me. 7 would have been allowed into Starfleet, I knew. 7 would have been allowed into Starfleet of TNG, even Starfleet of DS9. 7 did more than her share. And what risk? What risk is 7? If any Starfleet officer was to get taken by the Borg, they're going to lose everything they know is already going to be stolen by the Borg. There's no risk in 7 being, any extra risk. If anything, 7 has less risk of being retaken by the Borg because she's so good at knowing how to avoid the Borg. She would be the one to protect with secrets more so than any random captain or random officer who really doesn't know what it's like. Okay, so meanwhile, what's going on the ship is the next big problem is Rios. Jurati is fighting the Borg Queen from within her own head. And Jurati says two things. One, she understands what the Borg are all about now. And in one line, she changes the entire fabric of what the Borg mean. The Borg are no longer about perfection. For all of Voyager, we knew that the Borg were chasing perfection. It turns out, no, it was never about perfection. Jurati has found out what it's really about. The Borg Queen is really just lonely. The Borg Queen is lonely. All these thousands and millions of planets that she's taken, all the millions and millions, hundreds of millions, if not billions of drones. It was never about trying to find perfection or creating the perfect race or anything like that. It's all because the lady was lonely. That does not make any sense. Okay, if the Borg were assimilating cats, I would agree. But they're assimilating people. And those people are damn near perfect. I cannot believe that I'm supposed to believe the Borg have only been because the Queen is lonely. That does not pass the sniff test. It doesn't pass at all. But neither does the fact that Starfleet wouldn't accept 7. None of this passes the sniff test. Oh, so Jurati's in the Borg Queen's brain, and Jurati's like, I know I can't let you get this ship. So I put a fractal whatever password on the ship's main systems. And the Borg Queen is like, I don't care. I'll suck it right out of your brain. And Jurati says, that's what I did. It's not in my brain. I didn't memorize the answer. And that's actually a genius solution. If you don't know the answer, she can't take it from your brain. Which, it seems severe, but it's smart. But then she ruins it because instead of just never knowing what the answer is, so it makes the Borg Queen not have any hope of ever finding the answer. Jurati says, I put it in him. And then an Elnor hologram pops up. And Jurati says, this ship has the ability to create a hologram of anyone who's ever been on it. And I'm sitting there trying to understand what that truly means. If you've ever entered this ship, the ship retains the ability to create a hologram of you, but not just a hologram of you physically. It's able to know what you know, because the Elnor hologram has all of his combat abilities, his Qapla fighting style, his absolute candor personality. It has it all. It is a perfect copy of Elnor. And just in case we weren't sure, Elnor the hologram confirms this a little later on when talking to Raffi, because Raffi is all sad that Elnor died in her hands and she blames herself. So she talks to the Elnor hologram, who's the next best thing to real Elnor. And the Elnor hologram confirms, hey, I know what Elnor was thinking up until the moment of his demise, up to the actual moment he died. I know everything he was thinking, and he in no way thought bad of you at all. He only loved you. There was no hate in his heart for you in any way whatsoever. Maybe this hologram has learned to lie and just wanted to make Raffi die happy, but I find it hard to believe that to be the case. Although it's just as scary, I believe the writers believed that they really were making a copy of true Elnor, because he happened to walk through the ship. The ethics of that can be debated separately, but to be able to create a perfect copy of a human being up to the moment of their death, then really nobody dies anymore. Nobody ever has to die. If that can be put in a ship, it can be put in a building. And if it can be put in a building, it can be put everywhere. Literally no one has to die. Is this Confederation tech? Because everything seems to say the Confederation is far more advanced. Oh, also, at some point, the Rios hologram puts on a mobile emitter. A mobile emitter. Why does he need a mobile emitter? He's on a ship that's completely full, has hologram technology throughout the ship. And for the mobile emitter is about the same size as the one the Doctor wore in Voyager. That mobile emitter is from the far distant future, like the year 2900. Why does Elnor Hologram have access to a year 2900 mobile emitter in the Confederation timeline? I think the writers completely forgot the mobile emitter is future tech. And they just gave it to him because they're like, oh, he needs one to jump around the ship. A, he doesn't need one to jump around the ship. And B, he can't have one because it's from the future. So they really screwed up the Elnor hologram, the holograms in general, and it just screwed everything up. Okay, so Picard, we get the end of the story with Picard and his mother and the rooms and the passageways below the vineyard. So it turns out that Picard, he probably never had a brother in this timeline, because we see Picard, his dad, and his mom. We never see anything about a brother. The mother is insane. The father keeps her locked in a room for her own safety. Why doesn't the father take her to get treatment? Why doesn't the father take her to a hospital? Why doesn't the father take her to Starfleet Medical or any place? She never gets any treatment. They just lock her in a room and hope she treats herself. I don't understand. This makes zero sense, but literally the father just locks the mother in a room and hopes she gets better. Well, the mother talks Picard into letting her out one day, and she starts running through the passageways, the secret passageways. She teaches Picard how to get into the secret passageways, even though Picard is like, I can't go in there. My daddy said no. She's like, follow me, Jean-luc. Don't you want to love your mother? Blah, blah, blah. And so Jean-luc follows his mom. Anyway, he gets his foot stuck and she leaves him there to die. We saw that already, but to see it again. Anyway, it turns out Jean-luc, what he's been holding back, what he hasn't told anybody, is Jean-luc saw his mother hang herself. Well, at least he saw the result of her hanging herself. When he went to go back into the room, into the veranda where his mom had been, it was just her hanging from the ceiling. And it was very, very sad. This is the part where Seven tells Raffi that Starfleet wouldn't accept her because she was Borg, and she went full Ranger, meaning Fenris Ranger instead. So now they're realizing they're going to die, although they're not going to die, but they think they will, because they've got to make it 50 meters or 100 meters with just an ice pick and a corkscrew. And Raffi says, well, when we get out of this, and Seven looks at her and says, we're not getting out of this. And Raffi's like, you're right, we're probably not. And I thought, wow, how brave they are to actually kill off 7 of 9 and Raffi. Because, there is no chance. It's not even worth pretending. Oh, there is one woman. One woman is with Jurati as a personal guard. Elnor is looking for weapons. Even though he's a hologram, he should be able to just create weapons. out of thin air. Oh, and he found his sword. Why does Elnor need a sword? His sword should have been created on him. The sword should have been part of Elnor's clothing. I mean, Elnor didn't pop up naked. He popped up fully clothed. The sword should have been hanging on his back. I mean, the sword was always on him when he was on the ship. So, fine. He found a sword. So, Elnor now has a sword again. Anyway, Raffi and Seven, you think they're going to die, but no, of course they don't. They're perfectly fine. Now, Rios is arguing with the doctor. Rios wants to try to get back to the chateau to help Picard. Picard had not Laris beam him away, along with the doctor and the kid, so they could go to safety. Rios ended up getting shot in the arm, and the doctor says, listen, your arm isn't better. All we did was anesthetize it. We still got to fix it. She's like, what if your technology here fixes it? And Rios says, the tricorder. The doctor picks up the tricorder and knows how to use it to fix his arm. She just magically knows how to use future technology now. What's the point of going to Starfleet Academy if not to learn how to use a tricorder? A medical tricorder at that. So he fixes it. She fixes his arm all up. We've got Dr. Soong looking for Picard, but he doesn't realize he's in a hidden passage until he looks and he sees a shadow coming from behind the wall, and he realizes there's a secret passage, and in about 10 seconds, he's able to discover where Picard went. It took the German bad people months to figure it out. Dr. Soong, far more cleverer. He opens the door and he tells the Borg people to search for other entrances. Dr. Soong, those people don't look too smart to me. I don't think they have a heck of a chance in finding another entrance. So we have Picard and not Laris, walking around, and we see Picard is seeing flashbacks to him as a kid, and the mother playing hide and seek with him in there in the dungeon. And he's begging her to go back up. He has to eat supper, and you can teach him more about the constellations. And she's like, the stars, Jean-luc, promise me when you remember me as the brightest star and not as all the darkness I am. Okay, so what else? So we have a system on this ship to create a hologram that knows what everybody's thinking up to the moment of death, knows how they feel. If you're a great writer, you're a great writer. If you're a great fighter, you're a great fighter. I don't understand how it can be so accurate, but I know that this is ethically a super dangerous place to be going. Nobody will ever die. They will live forever as a hologram. And that is not where it's supposed to be. And they're certainly not supposed to have mobile emitters at this point in history. So Rios, when he got beamed back at the beginning, Picard told not Laris to shut off the transporter so Rios couldn't beam back. Well, Rios just, took him about 10 minutes to figure out how to use the transporter, even though this is alien tech, and he was able to, and he starts to want to beam back over. But this starts a 20-minute conversation with the doctor and her son about how maybe he was meant to stay in the past with him. So back on the ship, Elnor and Jurati come face to face, and Jurati's like, I told you couldn't stay hidden forever. And Elnor, the hologram, is like, who said I was trying to hide? And then the guards start shooting at Elnor. Elnor is a hologram. The bullets are passing right through him. Why are they shooting at him? The Borg Queen knows he's a hologram. She should be able to tell those guys to stop shooting or don't be an idiot and don't shoot to begin with. But no, and Elnor's like afraid that they're shooting at him like he could be killed by a bullet. He can't be killed by a bullet. He's a fucking hologram. He knows it. So anyway, Elnor closes a door and he comes face to face with Raffi and Seven. And this is where Raffi has to come clean to him because he's not the real Elnor, and she knows he's not the real Elnor, but she wants to tell him that she kept him because she was afraid of loneliness. And this is where Elnor says, it's okay. I remember what the real Elnor was thinking when he died, and it was only love. There was no hate. I share the recollection of his final breath. It was not of blame. It was of love. He loved you, Raffi. So there we go. Raffi can die happy now. Not that she's going to die anytime soon. Oh, Picard and not Laris are running around still, trying to find how to go. One way goes deep to the fields, the other goes deep into the chateau, and then the green lasers are out, so it warns them from going to the wrong spot. So Seven has to do something fast. Elnor says he'll hold them off as fast as long as possible. And Seven beams all of the Borg, of which there's, I don't know, half a dozen at least. She beams them all into the walls of the chateau. But she beams them into the walls right where Picard and Laris are. Perfect where Picard and Laris are. Like she purposely decided to put them next to Picard and Laris. So Picard sees all the walls turn into Borg, and he's like, oh, I guess our luck is turning. So the only person left on board is Jurati, and Seven tries to beam her out, but she has a transport inhibitor. So then Elnor and Jurati fight, and I'm like, no, Elnor, you have too much testosterone. You're not allowed to win this fight. And even though it seems like he won, and he put Jurati on her back, and he holds the knife up to her, the sword up to her, and Jurati says, 3 against 1 hardly seems fair. Seven's got a gun, Raffi's got a gun, and Elnor's got a sword. Raffi's like, we've got you dead to rights. And Jurati lets the tentacles go. She shuts off Elnor with one. She pushes Raffi onto her ass with another. And she rips into 7 of 9's stomach with the other. So 7 of 9 is now bleeding out. Jurati is saying she's going to head to the Delta Quadrant. Raffi saying, don't let her die like this. Jurati says she's absorbed millions of languages. There's a few common words among them. Love, hope, fear. No, those are not common words. And one more common still. Futility. And Jurati tries to pick up a phaser. And again, the Borg Queen could have killed Jurati, but for some reason just knocks her down. Why is the Borg Queen purposely hurting 7 more than Raffi? The Borg Queen had feelings for 7. If anything, Raffi should be the one that's being killed, and 7 should be the one alive and begging for Raffi's life. So Dr. Soong found Picard. He says, when you lose a lab rat, you don't follow it through the maze, you force it to surface? I don't understand. Jurati is going to kill 7, but she physically can't do it. And like, why am I crying? Jurati's tears are on her hand. It's like, why am I crying? I'm not supposed to be crying. Because she's the Borg queen. And it turns out it's Jurati, the actual Jurati. The same chemicals you use to take control, dopamine, adrenaline, are also produced for other things. So what happens when you hurt my friends? It's the same neural soup, but allowed her to wrestle some control away from the Borg queen. Okay, so here's another big thing. We get a whole difference on the Borg. The Borg are no longer about, did I say this right? I don't know. The Borg are no longer about reaching perfection. The Borg are about the queen. Yeah, I think I did. Are about the queen being lonely. The queen has been lonely this whole time. That's why she goes after all these other species. It has nothing to do with looking for perfection. Also, Jurati realizes that the Borg die in all the timelines. Regardless of the situation, regardless of the timeline, whether it's a Borg Slayer or United Federation of Planets, somebody always defeats the Borg. You always lose, says Jurati. That's why you fight so hard. So now Jurati spends like half an hour trying to convince the Borg queen to become a good person. Literally. She tells the Borg queen that you could become such a better person, and that you can, instead of assimilating everyone, you could only assimilate those people who want to be assimilated. And she's like, that sounds like useless. And no, Jurati says there's so many people in the galaxy that need help, like 7 right here. And I think 7 would rather die than live as a Borg, personally. But Jurati is 100% sure 7 would rather live as a Borg. So she does eventually talk the Borg queen into not being a Borg queen anymore, per se. She teaches the Borg queen to be a different kind of Borg queen. Probably the type of Borg queen that we saw in episode 1. So he says a real collective based not on assimilation but salvation. The Borg collective that embraces uniqueness of its members. A woke Borg. She wants to make the woke Borg collective. Your proposal is absurd, says the Borg queen, but not entirely unintriguing. Oh, it's over. It's over. The Borg went woke. Now they're going to be broke. Not broke cheap, like they're out of money. They're just going to break down, like when Laura was trying to control them. So Jurati is really trying to get her to fix 7, and the Borg queen eventually puts, 7 should be dead. 7 should be dead already. But for whatever reason, 7 is suffering for the last 15 minutes, lingering in pain, and the Borg queen finally decides to put the nanoprobes in 7. But the nanoprobes don't heal 7. Well, it does heal 7, but it also brings back all of her Borg enhancements, her Borg pieces. That makes absolutely zero sense. There is no reason why the pieces over her eye would come back if they're just repairing her. Whatever. It makes no sense. Rios is jumping back after 20 minutes of fighting with the doctor. The doctor's like, you should stay here. Maybe you were always meant to be here. And he's like, no, he's trying to protect your future. And she's like, but what if you were always supposed to be here? He's like, no, he's not. And he beams away. And luckily she wasn't kissing him when he does beam away. Otherwise, she probably would have been taken to France with him. Rios jumps in, kills one bad guy. The guy who was taking a comically long time to kill Picard. After the first bullet, a skeleton key just happens to fall on the floor, and Picard picks up the skeleton key. And of course, the skeleton key unlocks the rest of the memory, and he's able to tell Laris about how he saw his mother die by hanging, by suicide. And Laris talks him through this final emotional scene of his head. Dr. Soong picks up a gun that was not Laris's gun. And he's like, I guess you have to be from the future to fire this. And this is Gary 7 tech, not Starfleet or Confederation tech. So if you're not the right person, you have to have the right DNA or else it explodes. And Rios knew enough to tell that to him for some reason. So he does throw the weapon up in the air just as he's about to leave, and just as it's about to explode, and he uses the explosion to make a magical getaway, like somebody practicing magic would do. Throw up in the air, a little explosion, and then jump away in the smoke. So Jurati and the Borg Queen are becoming something new, something better together. And anyway, now they've got to take the ship. They've got to take the ship. And Jurati and Seven let them take the ship because that was the price. The price to pay was that she would cure Seven, and then she would get to take the ship. They completely forget the ship is not theirs to give away. The ship is Rios's ship at this point in time. It's Rios's ship. It is not their ship to give away. And yet, Seven and Raffi and Jurati, they don't give a shit about Rios. They don't give a shit about who owns the ship. Apparently, Raffi and Seven are perfectly capable of giving away shit they don't own. We see it's pretty freaky seeing the mother, Picard's mom, we see her do the hanging in reverse. So she actually unhangs herself, walks backwards off the chair, walks into a bedroom, and goes to sleep, which means that the rope hanging in the veranda was there the entire time. It was there waiting for her. Who put up this rope? Who put up the rope? Who left it there for this obviously sick woman to find? Was it the dad? Was it Picard himself? I mean, are we supposed to believe that the mom put the rope up the night before and knew she was going to get up in the morning and hang herself? I just don't believe it. It doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. But it's the only thing I can come up with was that Picard or the father put the rope up for the mother to find. Picard thinks that if he had just left the door closed, she might have become an old woman. No, Jean-luc, it doesn't work like that. Anyway, at the end of all this, Picard takes a rock, and we find out it was he who threw the first stone, he who cast the stone in the veranda and destroyed the first windows and the glass. And that makes sense, is that why he never had the veranda fixed, is because he's the one who destroyed it to begin with. Anyway, next week is the 10th and final episode of the season, and I realize now that we're not going to get any type of resolution for this season. I hoped we would. I'd hoped this season would be over like season 1 ended, but no. I don't think they're going to make it back to the future for next episode. I think they're just going to find a way to contact the rest of the crew, or maybe the first people in the old crew, to get help. But there is definitely a lot more to be said than they closed up in this episode. With that, guys, I'm going to say this was a terrible episode for the reasons I brought up and more. And again, this is another 0.1 out of 10. And we'll see what next week brings. Oh, and here's where Raffi says, whether you're Borg or human, you're the most extraordinary person I ever knew. All your life you've been running away from this Borg stuff. You can't help but wonder how much more you'd be capable of if you had just stopped running. Oh well. Bird out.